Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's March 30th, 2022. And today I wanted to share some thoughts about operating model. Right. So first of all, what is an operating model? Okay. And by the way, I'm talking this in the context of an implementation. And actually, now that I think about it, not just an implementation, but also what happened after, right? Now you got to live with it. And ideally, continuous improvement over your landscape, as well as just overall operating model. And I gotta be honest with you, like the first time I was exposed to the word or the phrase operating model, the term, I should say, I had no clue what it was talking about. I mean, I had an idea, but I didn't really understand what it was, as well as what how it was relevant to an implementation, right? An HRIS implementation. So let me try to simplify as much as I can this. An operating model in the HR context, or really in any context, right, from an organizational perspective, is how do we do things, right? How does the team operate? Who does what? Okay. So the way to think about it is, what are the things that we gotta do, right? So to simplify things, let's say we have recruiting. Well, we have a position that gets approved. Then a job requisition is created. So who does that? Then you start recruiting. Who does that? You need support, right? Something broke. Who does that? You need to update something in the system, let's say a job profile or a job description. Who does that? And so answering the question, who does what at what point in the process, that's your operating model, right? A model, right? And how it operates. That is fundamentally important before any implementation. See, a problem that I see just often and often, it's the idea that you kind of come up with your operating model as you are designing the system. And I think that is our way to do it, okay? I think I've seen it working in many cases, right? That's, you know, from my perspective, all process should always drive design, system design, okay? And so, and it doesn't really have to be something really hard, right? But understanding your operating model is huge because that's going to drive and influence processes, going to influence staffing conversations and requirements, right? And then eventually the design of any system. So the number one thing, in my opinion, that companies should do before even thinking about implementing a new system is identifying what's the operating model, who does what, okay? Some examples, right? If you have shared services or people operations, that's a consideration. Where are they located, right? Are they located, let's say if you have a hub in Europe, one in South America, and one in APAC or in India, how does that look like? You know, which center supports which countries, right? Or which, like, you have to know that stuff, right, before you start designing. Then the process, right? If it's a job requisition in the Americas, the operating model says that the people ops team, you know, I don't know, in Costa Rica is the one that opens up or that confirms the job description. I don't know, making this up, right? Might not actually be true, but or is in charge of creating the position. If it's a position in Europe, right, the team in Poland needs to begin the approval process. If it's someone within IT, right, it's a different process. If it's so now you have your operating model. Now you come up with the process, and then the system implementation becomes super easy because you just gotta follow those decisions that you already made. And then the design becomes a true system design. Okay, what are things that we're capturing, right? But by the time that you get into system design, I'll say, assuming that you have your operating model, so you know exactly who does what and what do they do, what do they need to do what they need to do. Then you have your processes. I guess in between that sandwich, you have what's called your service, your kind of service delivery catalog. So a catalog, like a restaurant menu, right? And service deliveries. I'm demystifying some of this consulting jargon, right? But now I lost my line of thought. Oh yeah, service delivery catalog, right? Service, what service am I providing? Delivery, right? The delivery of the service. So I need to open a position, right? Or I need to onboard someone, right? Or what's the service delivery that I'm providing? And then the catalog. What are the things that I'm responsible of doing within the operating model? Okay, my team only it does onboarding, right? But if someone needs to, I'm trying to think real examples, right? So someone, I don't know, made a mistake, right? And they need to redo their immigration documents. That's not part of the service delivery for people ops. That actually goes to the onboarding COE, for example, right? Or, I need to move a requisition back to an approver. But then the approver is on vacation. So who do I add? How do I handle that? Well, that's not people ops. I gotta submit a ticket with the HRIS team for them to troubleshoot. That's what the operating model dictates. So then from a service delivery catalog, this team does X, this other team does Y, and then the process underneath, right, drives kind of the workflow of, depending on the request, where does it go, who's responsible of doing it. Once you have that figured out, doing a system implementation really should not be hard. I think a lot of the problem is that you start the journey of designing something, and then you start designing the system, and then as you're designing the system, you start thinking about some of these questions. And at that point, you're not really thinking strategically nor holistically. You're just trying to get by so you can make a decision. So then you can meet the deadline, and because your project manager is calling you, you got to make a decision. So we got to finish those workbooks, right? So because we have a whole team, right, waiting here for to implement whatever decisions you made. So, and then from there, it just goes downhill, right? And so I'm a big proponent of doing sort of like that pre-work or homework before even starting to implement something. And the other problem too is that, at least this has been my experience, okay? A lot of the technical consultants are technical, right? And oftentimes you're involved in such a big, large implementations that you don't need to be a jack of all trades, right? You just need to know your little tiny piece and know it very well, and then just repeat project by project. It's really hard to have someone who, well, start from the top, understand what an operating model is, and can provide some insights about, influence, right, the operating model someone should follow. That's number one. Oh, and I have so many thoughts on that too, by the way, because in my career, I always get asked, well, what other companies do? Well, sometimes I have a problem with that because you're not other companies. I mean, I can kind of tell you, but your situation is different. So we just got to understand how they got to what they do, right? What were the variables, the resources, but then we need to come up with our own answers. But that's a whole other topic. And but yeah, someone who understands what's an operating model, who can influence service delivery catalog, as well as have a consulting approach. So if we're asking this team to do Y, they need to know how to do Y. So who's going to train them? Where does that fit, right? And like all this, like that is a true consultant, in my opinion. And you don't find many of them. And then come up with processes, or help the organization come up with processes, thinking not just that the service is delivered, but what about the experience? What about timing? What about legal implications, which is really big, right? You got to know those. And then on top of that, once you're designing these processes, also understand what the system can do, right? Or how can we make the system match that process, right? So by the way, number one, I call all consultants. That's what I've been working recently, right? Because I think it adds much more value, makes the job much easier. But I ask consultants, I call them, learn your functional side. I mean, technology is fine. You can learn it fairly quickly, but learn also the functional side, as well as the functional people. Get into the weeds with the technology too. I think it's valuable, right? I mean, I don't think it's as hard as learning technology is as hard as it used to be. Plus, access to information is all over the place now for free. So anyways, that was a whole brain dump, right? But it's something that I find it to be so important. I'm about to start consulting a client with that same thing, right? We're almost willing to start from scratch, come up with an operating model, do staffing, based off it, right? Then build so like the full enchilada, I'm gonna help them do. So I'm very, very excited about that project. But I realized, while talking to them, that they were having a hard time finding someone who could help them with this, because there are not very many people out there. I mean, and I recognize that. So it's just, I guess, the one thing I'll just invite whoever happens to be even listening to now at this point, I have it's probably already 10 minutes of video. It makes the job so much easier if you're able to to understand, even beyond processes like operating model. Oh, and then how do you come up with your operating model? See, that's where the fun begins, right? Because now you're being a strategic business, right? You're part of the business, so now you got to put a strategy, current reality, right? How much budget do I have? What's realistic, right? To have an operating model today is just like a fine balance there. But what's the strategy? What is the business doing? How are we trying to grow? What's going on with the business, right? And then what do you want to do as an HR organization? So you start with that band. Then you move on to operating model, service delivery, catalog, processes, system, and then business as usual maintenance, and then getting into the habit of continuous improvement, which is a whole different loaded topic. But it's really fun. I mean, it's really fun. That's really what's I think finding to be sexy about this job versus just following an implementation guide and just know where to click and feeling good that it works. But I don't think that moves the needle, right? I think it's much more rewarding to go to someone's career site or seeing the news, good news about a client, and then that the fabric of what they're doing, because it's 99% of the time driven by people, is based off some of the recommendation that you made. That is so rewarding. That makes the job so much easier. You look forward for Monday, right, to get to work. And also, I think once you're good at it, you get compensated very well for it. All right, that's what I have for today. If you made it this far, let me know, because I got a surprise for you. Okay.